The cold wind blew across the Arizona plains as the sun dipped behind the red cliffs. Ethan, a quiet cowboy in his early 30s, guided his horse along the dry trail. He had been out since dawn, rounding up stray cattle that wandered too far from his ranch. Dust covered his clothes, and the sound of his horse's hooves echoed through the still desert. He was used to silence. It had been his only company since his wife's passing 3 years ago. That evening, as he rode near the edge of the canyon, he noticed smoke rising in the distance. It wasn't from his land. It looked like the remains of a fire, maybe a camp. His first thought was to ignore it. Trouble often came with strangers, but something deep in his chest pushed him forward. He tugged the reins and headed toward the smoke. When he reached the spot, his heart sank. The camp had been attacked. Broken pottery lay scattered. A small fire still smoldered, sending thin trails of smoke into the air. He saw footprints, drag marks, and a few arrows stuck in the dirt. And then he saw her. A young woman lay face down near a rock. Her long dark hair spread across her back. Blood stained her torn buckskin dress. For a moment, Ethan thought she was gone. He knelt beside her and gently turned her over. Her face was pale, her lips dry, but she was breathing, just barely. She was Apache. That realization made him freeze. The ranchers nearby had warned him, never interfere in Apache matters. If their warriors found him with one of their own, they'd take it as an insult, maybe even an act of war. But then he saw the wound on her side. A bullet had grazed her ribs, bleeding badly. She'd die within hours if he didn't help. Ethan looked toward the horizon. Night was coming fast, and coyotes had already started howling. He sighed heavily, muttering, "All right, girl, let's get you out of here." He lifted her carefully and placed her on his horse. Her head rested against his shoulder as he rode back through the rough desert. The wind grew colder, biting through his coat, but he didn't slow down. By the time he reached his cabin, it was nearly dark. He pushed open the wooden door with his shoulder, carried her inside, and laid her on his bed. He lit the oil lamp, filled a basin with water, and tore his cleanest shirt into strips for bandages. He cleaned her wound carefully, his rough hands trembling. She moaned softly, speaking words he didn't understand. "It's all right," he whispered, his voice calm. "You're safe here." He boiled some herbs his late wife used to use for fever and made her drink a little. Her breathing steadied, though she still shivered. He covered her with a blanket, then sat beside the fire, his mind heavy with questions. Who shot her? Why was she alone? And what would happen if her people came looking? He didn't realize when his eyes closed. Hours passed. The fire crackled softly, casting faint shadows on the log walls. When Ethan woke, he felt warmth pressing against him. Something was wrong. He opened his eyes and froze. The Apache woman was lying on top of him. Her long hair brushed his chest, her face close enough that he could feel her breath. Her hand rested firmly on his shoulder. He tried to move, but she whispered sharply, "Don't move." Her voice was weak but filled with warning. Her dark eyes stared toward the window. Ethan turned his head slightly and saw two shadowy figures outside standing near the trees. His pulse quickened. Through the glass, he saw the faint gleam of metal. They were holding bows. The woman spoke again quietly. "If they think you hurt me, they kill you." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't know what to do, so he stayed still. The woman shifted slightly, making it look like she had captured him, her hand gripping his shirt tightly. For a moment, one of the shadows moved closer, peering through the window. Then both figures slowly disappeared into the night. She let out a long breath and collapsed beside him, trembling. Ethan sat up carefully and whispered, "They were your people, weren't they?" She nodded faintly. "They think white man bad," she said slowly, struggling with her words. "If they see you, with me hurt, they kill you." Ethan couldn't find words. She had just saved his life, too, after he saved hers. He offered her water and she drank, her hands shaking. He could see the exhaustion in her face, the pain in her wound, yet there was strength in her eyes. She looked around the cabin, then at him and asked softly, "Why you help me?" He paused for a moment. "Because no one else would," he answered simply. The rest of the night passed in silence. Ethan sat near the fire while she rested. Every now and then she would wake and whisper something in her native tongue. He didn't understand, but the tone was soft. Maybe gratitude, maybe confusion. At dawn, he stepped outside to check for tracks. The Apache scouts were gone, but their footprints led back toward the mountains. When he returned, the woman was awake, sitting up, her hand pressed to her side. You should stay still, he said gently. She looked at him for a moment before replying. You not afraid? Ethan gave a small smile. I was when I saw you lying there, but not now. Her lips curved slightly in the faintest hint of a smile. You strange man, she said quietly. He made her a bowl of soup from dried beans and venison. She took it slowly, her eyes never leaving his. There was a calm between them now, something unspoken but real. As the day went on, she grew stronger. Ethan could tell she was still wary, still unsure if she could trust him completely, but she no longer looked at him with fear. When he brought in more firewood, she whispered something that sounded like thanks. That night, while the wind howled outside, Ethan thought about what had happened. He had rescued a woman from a different world, one that had always been seen as enemy land. But she had risked her own life to protect his. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, whether her people would come looking, or whether she would vanish when she could walk again. But for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. As he looked across the room at her resting near the fire, he realized something strange. He didn't even know her name, yet her presence filled the cabin with a quiet peace he hadn't felt since his wife died. Before falling asleep, he whispered softly to himself, Whoever you are, thank you for saving me too. Outside, the moon rose above the cliffs, silver light falling through the window. The Apache woman slept soundly, her breathing even. For now, the war between two worlds had stopped. Inside a small wooden cabin, where a cowboy and a wounded stranger shared warmth, trust, and the fragile beginning of something neither could yet understand. The morning sun slipped through the cracks of the cabin walls, painting golden lines across the floor. Ethan woke to the sound of soft movement. The Apache woman was awake, sitting near the fire, trying to grind herbs in a small wooden bowl. She looked stronger now, her skin glowing with color again. Her wound had started to heal, though her movements were still slow and careful. When she saw him open his eyes, she smiled faintly, almost shyly. You wake now, she said. You sleep too much. Ethan chuckled lightly. Guess I needed it after last night, he said, remembering how she had protected him from her own people. The memory still felt unreal, how close danger had been, how quietly she had saved his life. He poured some water from the pot and asked, You never told me your name. She paused for a moment as if deciding whether to trust him. Naya, she finally said. My name is Naya, Ethan nodded. That's a good name, he replied. I'm Ethan. For a few minutes they sat in silence, listening to the wind outside. The morning air carried a soft chill. Naya picked up her bowl of herbs and pressed a bit of it against her wound. Ethan noticed her wince slightly and walked over to help. Let me do that, he said quietly. She hesitated, then nodded. He knelt beside her and gently tied a clean cloth around her waist to hold the herbs in place. Her eyes followed his hands, and for a moment the world seemed to slow down. She whispered, You good man, Ethan. He smiled without looking up, just doing what's right. Days passed, and the two of them began to understand each other more, even without many words. Ethan taught her some English, pointing at objects and naming them: fire, water, horse. Naya would repeat each word carefully, then teach him how to say it in Apache. They laughed when either made mistakes. Every day she grew stronger. She began walking outside, leaning on a wooden stick for support. Ethan would watch from the porch as she admired the open sky. She loved the sound of the river nearby and often stood silently, eyes closed as if listening to something he couldn't hear. One evening, while Ethan was fixing the fence near the barn, he heard her voice behind him. Why you live alone? She asked. He stopped working for a moment, looking out toward the horizon. I had a wife once, he said quietly. She got sick. After that, I didn't see much point in being around people. Just me and the land now. Naya didn't say anything for a while. Then she said softly, You carry hurt inside, like broken arrow in heart. Ethan gave a sad smile. Maybe, but you've seen worse, haven't you? Her face darkened. Soldiers come to our camp. Say we steal cattle, not true. We run, but they shoot. My father tell me hide. I see my people fall. I run far. They find me later, those men. I fight, they shoot me. I crawl away. Her voice cracked a little and she looked away. Then you find me. Ethan didn't know what to say. He just placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You're safe now, he said softly. That night the sky was full of stars. Naya sat outside near the fire, humming a soft Apache tune. Ethan listened from the porch. It had been years since music had touched his home. Her voice carried a strange sadness but also hope, like the wind whispering through the mountains. The next morning, Ethan woke to find the cabin empty. Panic rushed through him. Her blanket was folded, her walking stick gone. He stepped outside, calling her name, but the land was silent. Only the sound of the river answered. He spent the whole day searching the nearby woods, but there was no trace of her. By sunset, he returned home, tired and heavy-hearted. He didn't realize until then how much she had changed his days, how her voice, her laughter, her quiet strength had filled the emptiness inside him. 2 days later, he heard hoofbeats outside. Ethan grabbed his rifle and looked through the window. What he saw made him freeze. A group of Apache riders was approaching, about a dozen of them. At the front rode Naya, wearing a clean buckskin dress, her hair braided with feathers. Ethan lowered his rifle and stepped out slowly. His heart pounded. Behind her, a tall older man dismounted. His face was marked by years of battle and wisdom, and he wore a necklace made of eagle claws. Naya walked up to Ethan and said calmly, "Do not be afraid." The older man looked at him for a long time, then spoke in broken English. "You saved my daughter." His voice was deep and steady. "You good man. You have honor." Ethan realized with shock this was the Apache chief. Naya was his daughter. The chief handed Ethan a small carved stone shaped like a hawk. "This gift," he said. "Friendship." Ethan took it carefully, bowing his head slightly. "I didn't know she was your daughter," he said. "I just couldn't let her die." The chief nodded once. "Heart of warrior. You understand." Then he turned to Naya and spoke to her in their language. She listened quietly, then faced Ethan again. "I must go," she said softly. "My people need me. They think I die. Now they know truth." Ethan felt something twist inside his chest. "You don't have to leave right away," he said. "You can rest more, stay another night." She smiled gently. "You kind. But I belong to them." She stepped closer, her eyes meeting his. "When I wake on top of you, you think I hurt you. But I save you. 2 men outside with bow. They see us. I make them believe you my prisoner. That night my heart beat fast. I think I die. But you live. That good." Ethan could only whisper, "You saved my life again." She nodded slowly. "You saved mine first." They stood there, neither speaking, as the wind blew between them. Finally, Naya placed her hand over his heart and said, "My spirit remember you." Ethan swallowed hard, trying to hold back his emotions. "And I'll remember you, Naya. Always." She turned and mounted her horse. The chief gave Ethan a respectful nod before riding away with the others. Naya looked back once, her eyes soft, filled with something he could never forget. Gratitude, sorrow, and something more that words couldn't name. When they disappeared beyond the hills, Ethan walked back to his porch. The cabin felt quiet again, but it was no longer lonely. On the table lay the carved stone the chief had given him. He picked it up and held it tightly in his palm. That night, as he sat near the fire, he thought about her voice, her courage, and her kindness. He realized that some people come into our lives for only a short time, but they leave something behind that lasts forever. Every now and then, when the wind blew through the canyon, he thought he could hear her voice calling his name, faint but clear. It gave him peace. He would look toward the mountains and whisper softly, "Be safe, Naya." And though their worlds were different, their hearts had shared something that no distance could erase.